Hello, my name is Jeremy Barnes, and today I'm going to do a video about the Marvel Cinematic Universe Phase 4, and I'm going to do a ranking of all of the projects in Phase 4. And before I start, I just want to do a bit of a recap of the Infinity Saga. I'm wearing my Infinity War shirt today because that's kind of what kicked off Phase 4, but I also want to kind of mention kind of like the overarching theme of Phase 4. But before I can do that, I want to tell you kind of the way I think about the phases and how each one does have an overarching theme that kind of groups the movies originally and then now movies and TV series together within a phase. So I'm going to talk about each of the first three within the Infinity Saga and then talk about Phase 4, which started the Multiverse Saga. So Phase 1 quickly was the main theme was basically individuals realizing their own faults and becoming better afterward. And that was true for Iron Man, Hulk, Thor, and less the case with Captain America, but you can twist it to fit that theme. And then the Avengers was about all of those people coming together to form a team that started out not too great, but then by the end of it, they were able to work together and get the job done. And then Phase 2 was kind of a response to the Avengers movie, and it was everybody realizing that things in the world that they once knew is not going to be the same. And that was true for Iron Man 3 with his Tony Stark's PTSD, and Thor: The Dark World, where he no longer wants to be king like he did in his original appearance. And the Winter Soldier with the fall of Shield, and then Guardians of the Galaxy kind of bringing the audience to a new frontier of the Marvel Cinematic Universe into space and the sci-fi genre, and then Age of Ultron having basically our first mutants in the MCU, even though at the time they didn't really call them that, but enhanced individuals that were not kind of accidents like Hulk was, or created. Um, And then Ant-Man, similar to Guardians of the Galaxy, introduced the quantum realm. So that was also a new frontier, which we're going to see now not have the full fruits of until Quantumania coming out next year. And then Phase 3 was about division and then unity. So I think the division was kind of in the beginning, and then by the end of it, coming back together. And Civil War was what started it, and that's kind of what splintered the Avengers into two separate teams, one siding with Iron Man, one with Captain America. Doctor Strange had a division between the mind and the body. Guardians of the Galaxy 2 also split up that team, but they came together at the end of that film, unlike the Avengers. Spider-Man Homecoming was basically like a division between the mentor of Tony Stark and his student of Peter Parker, and also Peter Parker himself dividing his technology, the suit, from himself, the person. Um, and I thought that was one of the better movies in Phase 3. Thor Ragnarok was kind of a split between Hulk and Banner, even though it was a Thor movie. I think that was kind of the main takeaway when you think of how it connects with the other movies in the saga. Black Panther was kind of the divide between the nation of Wakanda and the rest of the world. Infinity War was the beginning of their path back to unity with the Avengers, uniting to face Thanos and his forces. Ant-Man and the Wasp was the union of Ant-Man and Wasp, and also the past generation of Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne with the present generation of Scott Lang and Hope Van Dyne. Captain Marvel was a division between perception and reality, because it was kind of a mind fuck from the Skrulls uh, kind of opening up memories that were real, whereas Carol thought that they were manipulating her mind, but it was actually the Kree who were doing it the whole time. Um, and then Endgame was when the Avengers finally did come together and united once again. And then Far From Home, which was the true close of Phase 3, according to Kevin Feige, was Spider Man's union of self, where he really kind of became his own hero by the end of that movie. Um, that one kind of twisted his journey from Homecoming, where it was like him and his technology, but he wanted to be a hero. Where in this one, he didn't want to be a hero; he just wanted to be Peter Parker. But by the end, he like truly put those two things together and kind of was forced to because of Mysterio at the end of that movie. So now I'm going to talk about Phase 4. And what I believe is the main theme of Phase 4 is trauma and healing from that trauma. And not everybody necessarily does heal from it within these series and movies. But I'm just going to go in order of release for Phase 4, and then I'm going to do my ranking of all of the projects. So for WandaVision, that one was kind of focused on loss uh, of her loved ones, which previously was Pietro, her brother Quicksilver, and then Vision in the Battle of Infinity War, um, and then her coping mechanism, which was creating the Hex, and then the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. It was basically the Winter Soldier's crimes. That was the trauma for Bucky, and then also for the world, the blip of Thanos' snap at the end of Infinity War, and how the world is kind of moving on and healing from that event and that 5 years that like half the universe was just gone. For Loki, he saw like a recap of his 616 universe of the MCU timeline, his life, and then from that creating a new one with the TVA. Black Widow was prequel, and in that movie, it was basically her making up for her past sins, which were obviously traumatic, and her like initiation into the Red Room program, um, and finding peace with the events of her past and coming together with her found sister Yelena. Shang-Chi was focused on the trauma from Shang-Chi's paternal relationship, um, and same with his sister as well, Jailin. What If was many different episodes, but I feel like that show could also be kind of wrapped in with this overarching theme, where a lot of the episodes had loss in them, and it was forming bonds despite that, or because of those shared kind of experiences or similar experiences, like we saw with the Guardians of the Multiverse, where when all the different characters from each of the episodes came together at the end of that series. And then Eternals is basically the trauma of familial ties and also humanity's failures as a species on a planet, as like the leading species on a planet. Hawkeye was him dealing with Nat's death in Endgame, and then also his crimes during those 5 years of the blip as Ronin. No Way Home, it was about death. He kind of already had to deal with Tony Stark's death in Far From Home, but in No Way Home, he also experienced the death of Aunt May, so he could kind of loses everybody, but he also has a sense of duty that he still finds in being Spider-Man. That's why he kind of went back to having a secret identity at the end of that movie. Moon Knight which was one of my favorite shows of this year, was about childhood trauma and coping mechanisms of that trauma. And for Moon Knight himself, it was his identities dissociating, as Stephen Grant and Mark Spector were the primary two that we saw in the show, and them kind of like helping each other out and dealing with that childhood trauma in different ways. And then Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness was, I think, more so a loss of personal connection. Like Stephen Strange is kind of like always just to himself, but by the end, he kind of wants to go out back into the world and start forming more relationships. Miss Marvel, I think, is generational trauma, like we see with her great grandmother. I think it is Aisha, and how that affected her daughter, which was Kamala's grandmother, and basically the kind of cycle of trauma that each parent passes down to their offspring. Um, and then in Thor: Love and Thunder, I think it was loss of faith with Jane Foster, as well as sickness, and how that could be traumatic. Um, as well as for Thor, purpose, and like kind of finding a purpose through any trauma that has been experienced or any losses that Thor has like been through um, throughout his long life, many of which have happened in his recent life. Um, but I think he did find that by the end of that movie. For She-Hulk, I think it was kind of about societal trauma with Jennifer Walters just as a woman in a man's world, and also about self worth, um, like her feeling like she did mean something or was important to some people in some way. Um, and then Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, the last like major film of Phase 4, was, I think, about tremendous loss in a short period of time, as well as a loss of faith because of that, that we saw with Shuri, and also oppression of people for resources, like we saw with Namor and Talocan and his mother and the Mayan people, um, and how at any moment that can happen to Wakanda, and that's kind of what Wakanda was trying to prevent. Um, I didn't include the like special presentations, but I think that could kind of be thrown into this topic as well. Specifically, especially Guardians of the Galaxy, the holiday special. That was like Peter dealing with his trauma of losing Gamora, as well as the perceived trauma of Yandu's kind of toxic parenting of Peter. But that ended up being something that was kind of subverted in that special. Um, so that one is, it doesn't tie in as well. But now I'm gonna do my ranking of Phase 4, and my number one favorite project was WandaVision, and it was actually the first project of Phase 4. So they started off on with a huge bang, and it was also their first foray into television. Marvel Studios actually producing themselves. So it was a really great start, and it made me fall in love even more with Scarlet Witch, Wanda Maximoff. And it just had a lot of heart, a lot of comedy. It was a very feel good show, but also it got very real and dramatic, like near the end of it. So I think it had a lot to say, and I think its story and the way that it wanted to. I think it did it like pretty much perfectly. Next would be Moon Knight. That one's a bit more divisive, I think, but I really liked it. I'm a huge fan of Egyptian mythology, so I like finding more out about it in that show. And I thought the character himself was really cool. It had a really cool costume, and Mark Spector and the whole kind of like mystery aspect with his dissociative identity disorder. He doesn't know what the hell is going on. And then we kind of find out with Stephen Grant as the audience, and I really like that stuff in the show. Number three is Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, which was, I think, in my opinion, the best Phase 4 movie. It's pretty close with No Way Home, which is coming up. Um, but I think Wakanda Forever did everything that it needed to do and did it really well, which was a tall order, but I think it achieved it. So I was really happy with it. And then next one is another show, Loki season one, like I mentioned earlier. And that was a big surprise because when they announced Loki, this series, I was like, Loki? Really? Him getting his own series? But it turned out great, and the connection with Kang was awesome. And after that was Spider-Man No Way Home, even though I was a little bit disappointed with it, just because it didn't give me everything that I was hoping for, like a Sinister Six team. Um, it did an awesome job of bringing back the two previous film Spider-Man, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, and their dynamic of all three of them together was just perfect. Um, so I think it was really good. After that, some people might be surprised by this, is actually What If season one. I personally really liked What If. I didn't like or love every episode, but most of them I did. And altogether, I thought it was a really cool series. The animation style I think was really cool, really fluid. And I think the finale when they brought everybody together was really cool. I do wish we got to see that episode that was cut out, but I am hoping we get to see it in in season two, as well as some more fun stories that are separate from the main timeline. Um, After that would be She-Hulk for me. I actually really like She-Hulk. I thought it was really funny. I liked all the cameos, and none of them were like crazy, like important cameos, but they were just fun cameos, just to see these different characters in kind of everyday natural situations, which was kind of like the whole idea behind the show. Um, and I like Jennifer Walters herself. Um, so I had a fun time with it. After that would be Eternals. It's kind of like almost smack dab in the middle of my list of Phase 4 movies or projects. And I really liked Eternals. I thought it was really cool, really kind of epic in terms of the display, the way that they displayed the film. And the ending kind of blew my mind when I saw it for the first time with Arishem coming to Earth and just taking the Eternals back. That was kind of crazy to me. And it introduced Dane Whitman, which I'm hoping to see more of, and kind of the more supernatural side of things in the MCU, which are barely getting started um, with Blade and all that. And we saw more of that in Werewolf by Night, that special. Um, After Eternals would be Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. I also really like that one, but the biggest draw for me was the Scarlet Witch, and I kind of wish it was just her movie and not Doctor Strange's movie. I think it would have been better for it, but it is what it is, and overall it was okay. A little bit disappointing, but I did enjoy it. Next would be Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which was also one of the earlier shows, and I thought that one was really good. Pretty early on. The only thing that kind of makes it lower on my list is the like main villains. I feel like they weren't as interesting as they could have been. They're kind of one note. So they're kind of what dragged the show down a little bit for me. After that would be the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special. I thought that was really fun, really Christmassy, perfect for the Christmas spirit. And they had all Christmas songs on their set list, which was also cool and fun. And it had a lot of Christmas heart and spirit to it. So I thought it was fun, but it was kind of a one-off thing, so it was not overall like, very important. I probably will watch it every Christmas, but I'm not gonna be watching it otherwise. And then it would be Miss Marvel, which overall I thought was decent, but it didn't really blow me away by any stretch of the word. But I did like it more than Thor: Love and Thunder, which that one left me with some things that I was disappointed by, whereas Miss Marvel kind of liked it for what it was, but just like minimally. Thor and Love and Thunder, the coolest thing about it was the kind of cosmic aspect to it, how they like kind of introduced the idea of like these godly figures, like the Celestials, but also including Eternity, which is a huge cosmic figure in the Marvel Universe, and some other figures as well that were kind of teased, more like as Easter eggs. And they also teased Living Tribunal in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. But then the last four on my list are ones that I was like kind of super disappointed by. Black Widow being the first of those movies. I feel like I should either should have never made this movie, or it should have been a prequel kind of set before any of the events in the MCU, like before Iron Man 2, with the story of Nat and Clint, Hawkeye and Black Widow, um, and kind of seeing her origin instead of kind of being more of an introduction to a new character, kind of to take over the mantle of Black Widow, which was Yelena Belova. Um, so I was just kind of disappointed that it wasn't really about Natasha, um, as like it was kind of advertised to be. And Yelena herself didn't really hold my attention until her next appearance in the MCU. But the next movie is Werewolf by Night, which I was hoping would be like awesome, and it was pretty damn good. But for me, because of something new, it was just too short. Like I just wanted way more of it, and because there wasn't, I was kind of disappointed overall. But it was shot like really good, really well, and I think it was very true to the type of thing that it was trying to be or trying to be like. So I don't think it was like bad by any means, but it just left me kind of disappointed. And then second to last is Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. That, like Black Widow, was just a very mediocre movie for me. And like somehow Thor: Love and Thunder, which to me could be considered, I would not argue with somebody who would say it's a bad movie. Shang-Chi is not a bad movie, but it's still lower on my list just because I would prefer a quote unquote bad movie that does kind of new or cool things than a mediocre movie that doesn't really do anything new. And I think that's kind of how I felt about Shang-Chi. The coolest thing I think about it was actually the third act, um, with the Great Protector and everything. All of that shit was really fucking cool to me. And the action was really good. Like the choreography of the fight scenes was really good in the movie. But the story was kind of like not that interesting. So that's kind of what brought it down for me. And that's what I kind of mean by not doing anything new. Um, and even though the choreography was good, I don't even think it has the best action of like Marvel movies. So I was also kind of disappointed with that. And unlike most people or a lot of people that I've heard, I actually didn't like Wenwu as the villain. I feel like they could have done more with the relationship between him and Shang-Chi. So that's why it's my least favorite movie in MCU Phase 4. But my least favorite show and project overall is Hawkeye. I thought that shit was like it was never boring to me, but I just didn't really care that much about it. I think it gave Hawkeye his best action that he's ever gotten in the MCU. But the best thing about it was not him, it was actually Kate Bishop, similar to Black Widow, where Yelena was kind of the focus, not Natasha. And in Hawkeye, Kate Bishop was definitely the best part about it. Um, and even though they were kind of teasing Kingpin, and they did introduce Kingpin into the MCU proper in that show, I feel like the way that they did it was kind of like not the best way to go, and it was kind of weird the way that they ended his kind of arc in the show. So overall, that was my least favorite project. I'm hoping his future appearances, Kingpin, that is, are gonna be much better and a little bit less kind of goofy and like over exaggerated with his like strength. But we'll see what happens in Echo, which I think is gonna be his next appearance in the MCU. But yep, that's my ranking for Phase 4 of the MCU. Thank you for watching my video. I'll catch you next time. Peace.